do you have an issue that you want to talk? Like maybe we could pre-talk, and rather than having anything official, we can just talk
Yeah.
about any topics that you wanted to discuss.
There are several.
Ah.
Let me look up for a second. Today, for one, Spokje, I don't know how it's pronounced correctly, requested a review about deprecated and obsolete modules and themes.
Okay.
I'll paste the link in the chat. 1 second.
Okay. I will take
that one. Then also XYM requested about a D10 soft blocker issue also today, right before the meeting. That is that one. And I got aware all those issues I've already pasted in today's issue. And I guess Benji will transfer them for next week's. There's also the following, also by XYM. It's about the project messaging in core.
Okay.
And the last one that is from last week's, that was by Andy Post. It's about, and that I haven't looked really into yet. It's about add a requirements check for GD support to allow of allowed image types. That one.
So let's take a quick gander and process. Okay. I'm starting at the back. I'm wondering what specific usability thing is we looking for? Well, Benji wrote needs issue summary update.
Yeah.
Please make it easy. Okay, so I would probably wait on
until the updates.
Yeah, because they need to make it clear what they want us to do.
And what
So
the
it looks
actual
like
goals are.
Yeah, because I mean, I see in number 60. So I guess this is not an official meeting because it's just you and I.
Yep.
So we don't have to do the normal dance. But it sounds like I mean, I don't know what what they mean by UX point of view and wording. So they're talking, okay, so they want wordsmithing.
Yep.
On number 67 is my guess. There's an image in number 67. So they really do need to update it so that they know what we should be giving feedback on.
I remember now. I took a quick look. Yeah, indeed. It's mainly about the wording, and they combined for one format missing and two formats missing, or two and more formats missing. It's definitely useful, but yeah, as you said, they need to update. And as Benji already wrote.
Yeah. Okay. And Benji is definitely an excellent, like I wouldn't want to do any wordsmithing without his feedback because he's 10 times the writer I am. All right, so I'm going to look at it looks like you commented on the second to last one.
That's the project messaging.
Yes.
Messaging, yep.
Wizards. Channel for messaging. And this reminds me of WordPress, because I think WordPress has this kind of thing.
Yep, it has.
Yeah. All right. So what is the feedback we're looking for? Now that I've got context.
They want to that someone is taking a general look at the whole functionality and the feature itself. So nothing specific, just in general, get a sign off. I've already taken.
Yeah.
I go first.
Yeah.
You go first.
Oh, no. I was going to say you're about to read what your comment is. So please go ahead.
Okay. I've already taken a look while that issue was still a contrib module. So basically it's just the bell icon at the top and the sidebar getting out, showing the messaging. Back then when I've looked, it was already quite solid, but I have a general problem about the feature itself. I guess it's, let's say you are a user, then, and you're not really interested in that kind of news. It's sort of noise. Let's put it that way.
So I need to see where it is. I'm looking for an image. Yeah. Okay. So I have opinions that independent of you, because the first thing I was thinking about, I was reading XJM's comment, and in XJM's comment, she says,
which comment number you refer
to? I want to make certain that it is her comment. It may be the thing at the top. It was
okay.
Maybe it was yours. It's all about sidebar. Wow. Okay, it wasn't either. It wasn't XJM's comment then.
Okay.
Somewhere while I was reading through this very quickly, I saw the word sidebar, and that to me is an immediate red flag. Because Drupal news is intended for people with administrative rights or are really high level, like really intense site builders. Like the people who are going to care about that messaging are a very specific role. But use of the sidebar is overloaded right now for a whole lot of different things. Like I've been seeing practically everything we do. Like just the other week, like 2 or 3 weeks ago, we were looking at for layouts and things were getting loaded into sidebar.
Yep.
And so my concern is we run the risk, if we keep on dumping all of this information into making the sidebar pure noise, even for the people who need this information.
Yep.
I absolutely agree that it's convenient and it looks nice. But I feel like, and this is going to be, again, I have a tendency to get off track from the issues. And so I can hear Benji's like, we don't need to talk about this, but in my opinion, I wonder if what we're trying to do is provide information that belongs in an administration dashboard, something intended for the people who are site builders and the back-end code maintainers. And where we need a dashboard space for that kind of information, we keep on loading it into the sidebar or putting it in other places.
I totally agree. Two things. First, from my understanding, and you've mentioned WordPress, and that was the inspiration that feature came from, I guess. There it's not only for administrators, because in that sidebar you get, for example, also notified about meetups in your area, for example, and other details. That per se isn't that bad. So it shouldn't be exclusive only to administrators and site builders. And I guess that's also the intention of that feature, that it should be provided to a broader audience. But as you said, and it's my main gripe at the moment, in Drupal, you don't have some sort of a notification framework that informs you that something happened, not only in the regards of project announcements, but also if something happened, for example, in whatever context, that you get notified that something happened. Like, for example, like in the contrib space, Danze does the module. And to build a interface pattern like that and only restricted to those project announcements is a bit, well, much and overloaded. And on the other hand, that is something I'm thinking about lately. I'm dealing with a few, let's say, issues with my eyes over the course of the last few weeks that prevent me from reading and especially focused writing. And a few weeks ago, we were talking during the Portland Drupal camp about DrupalCon, sorry, about the dashboard feature and a new initiative or a new group working on that feature. And there, I've suggested to do some sort of what we already talked about during the UX meeting about research. That document I'm still in the course of writing, nearly finished now. The last few days got better with my eyes, but even though I'm unable to write, still I was able to think about it. And that is something, what you also touched is those announcements in the course of a dashboard, also like WordPress does, is way more convenient and way more specific than that overloaded and in different contexts sidebar I consider problematic. And one idea I had is which could, let's say, eliminate part of the messages by that announcement functionality is, if you have a dashboard, you could add the possibility to something like you have in desktop software. Like if you install a new software, you get a pop-up saying a new version got installed. You have X number of new features. So a user gets in a dashboard, hey, there's a new version of, for example, Drupal installed, because as a non-site builder, as a non-admin, you don't know that a new version is installed, basically. You just have perhaps notice a certain aspect. But if you have some sort of information pane, getting specific the functions that are new, that way you get aware of them and perhaps also use them more. And because sometimes new features don't get used, because not because people don't like them, but they just don't know them. So
well, in my mind, a dashboard would simply be an opinionated layout for a specific URL. Like you have a URL that goes to a specific page that has a essentially pre-built layout with things that we assume are a good starting point for a particular role, and we can pick whatever role or groups of roles we want. Like, so from my opinion, and I think this is something that is easily up for debate. I would exclude anonymous and authenticated, but I would, out of the box, whatever other roles we have, whatever elevated roles we have, like the content editor, I would assume that all of them want access to this dashboard. So the dashboard is there for essentially elevated privileges on a fresh out of the box site, because that accommodates everything from a team that needs exactly the use case you've talked about, which is they're kind of power users who need to know that the site is updated, to it accommodates administrators or a blogger who's the only user of the site, because they would all want to have those elevated privileges.
Yep.
And you could always add authenticated and change it, but it's using existing infrastructure and existing patterns. And it would come preloaded with blocks and view blocks that load the types of reporting and information in a way. So I feel like our reports dropdown is very kind of old school. Like it's an approach from 15 years ago where a lot of people are expecting to see, again, some sort of like power user administrative dashboard that gives them all the information in concise bytes. And so one of those could be a block that shows Drupal camp stuff, and another one could be updates from Drupal.org, and another one could be just whatever default report we think is important, or even just an alert section. But the idea being that it brings everything very comfortably into a single space, and people could then latch onto that with any contrib modules or custom stuff they did, and they'd know that's where they should be presenting administrative or power user information.
Yeah. Basically, you need per role, per elevated role, like you said, you need a default set of displayed blocks. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, you should provide the option that each user is able to adjust that new blocks could be added or other blocks could be removed. Because if someone doesn't care about, for example, the next Drupal camp in an announcement, so it could be easily blended out.
And this is going to sound crazy, but I'm actually kind of going back in time to the maybe 8 or 9 years ago in Drupal land, when we were focused on intranets, and essentially this would provide a much better landing page than the default user account landing page that people go to today.
Yes, totally agree. The dashboard should be the landing page.
And that way, you can really, and you can have opinions and stuff like that, and distributions can put together different pre-built dashboards, but it's the pattern that we would want to establish for a more robust experience.
Yes. And one detail, I also did a bit of research in other CMS systems. I'll post everything when I finish the write-up for the research, for the interviews. Alongside, I will post the links and research I've did in regards of the other CMSs. And in Typo 3, they have a pattern I like, meaning you have the default dashboard as your landing page per se, but also provide the site builders the option that you can create dashboards at any place in your admin interface. So basically, for example, for the content type overview, a dashboard, you could adjust to your liking and so forth. So in different contexts, different dashboards with a smaller scope, and the overall dashboard as your landing page or as your home base, so to say.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, I think that the one of the challenges is there is a lot more opportunity for people to bike shed when it comes to opinionated dashboards than simply having an announcements in the sidebar. And so this may have been an approach that people decided upon because it was more practical and more achievable.
Yes, totally agree.
So I don't know how well the recommendation would go over, but it sounds like you and I agree almost 100% on this. I just worry that a lot of times there are certain paradigms, again, like reports, that it's the old way of doing things. We just really never updated them. And like announcements, I would assume announcements would be website announcements. So it's a great feature, but I would assume that most of it is for the site builder, I think of it like in high school or a gymnasium or whatever. I think of it as the announcements that someone announces for the day to the general population over
Yes.
the speakers. That's what I think of, not Drupal.org announcements.
Yes. Basically announcements, let's use the term notifications as a site internal notification in the scope of the site, but those announcements is the scope outside basically Drupal.org and Drupal association. So it's a different context with which might confuse people. So, but I think, let's say, as you said, we agree totally that the future goal should be to move everything into dashboard, in the dashboard functionality. But I think until dashboards have landed for the time being, it would be useful to bring that feature in, and
Yes.
you could still use the interface patterns at a later point and reutilize them for something else, for example, for notifications, which are, as you said, announcements inside the page for the site builder that something happened on the page, which could be also displayed then in the dashboard. But that bell icon, if you get a badge with, for example, 2 new messages, that is an interface pattern people know from other apps, for example, the message sender from Mac OS and so forth.
Yep. That absolutely makes sense in terms of progression. So we accept and support moving this in on schedule with really no changes. We can recommend that maybe a related issue gets opened to allow different things to get plugged into announcements. And once you've done that, then when we create the dashboard in the future, all you're really doing is turning off notifications related to Drupal.org from that area and simply putting them elsewhere. I would want, and maybe this is already there, I would want it to be very easy to disable announcements, so that if a site builder didn't want that icon because they were never planning on sending notifications, you wouldn't have anything appear up there.
That I'm not aware. When I've tested, I guess it's an either or. If it's installed, everyone is seeing it, I guess. And if not, that would be something we would have to test.
Yeah. So it's there for all users. It's not there just based upon role,
I suppose, but perhaps there is a permission stating which roles are able to see those announcements. That might be that you're able to granularly exclude roles from seeing those announcements.
Because the other thing is, again, we don't have the patch loaded, so we can't see, and I think we'll have a conversation next week when more folks are on the call. But we could recommend that it starts as an administrator role only, so that it's there for people who use this as a blogging site or the original site builder, but there's a permission for it. I'm assuming that permission already exists. They can add additional roles, but the default configuration would be admin role only. And then they can come in and say, hey, I want more roles to see the announcements. That would avoid the risk of any confusion whatsoever. It wouldn't disrupt any sites that are loading this in. And it could start with it enabled after load, rather than people having to it introduces awareness to the appropriate target audience, which I would think of as administrators and site builders. And then they can start to leverage, hey, they want to make this available to other account or other roles.
Yeah, or maybe it might be also worth a thought to add in the account settings of a user in a role able to see that announcement sidebar to switch it off. So you don't have to uninstall the module, but on a per user basis are able to blend it out, because some people might don't care at all about it and consider it just as noise.
Right. And so I think that's a second point that's also valid. Like, one point is you want to give the site builder, site administrator the ability to turn it off globally for individual roles. And we want to determine which roles should start with announcements on by default when you fresh install the site. I'm curious about what pattern we want to have when you are upgrading into a version that has announcements from a version that does not have announcements. Is it automatically disabled, or do we assume that like, I'm assuming if we upgraded from one site to the next, the module would not be enabled. And since the module's not enabled, it wouldn't matter. When they go to enable the module, it would add it to, again, administrator or some particular role, and then they could configure permissions to add additional roles. And then we also want individual users whose role has been chosen to do that to have essentially the permission to hide it and not see it if they choose. Okay.
And I think one thing we should definitely have a focus on is when we review the feature in regards of the interface copy, to see if it's exactly clear about the context of those announcements. As you said, that is coming from Drupal Association or Drupal.org, and it is not specific to this site.
And if you're, I'm looking at the issue right now, I'm looking at the recording of where it's showing how it works. If we wanted to have the capacity for individuals to hide it, my question is whether or not that should actually be part of the sidebar itself. Like, do you want to force, will people know that it's hideable if they have to go to their user account page to make that setting change? Or should we have like a hidden thing and you press the hidden button and then it hides all announcements?
I think it would be good to have it in both places, on the account page as well as in the sidebar. And perhaps an easy pattern coming to mind is you have the top bar with the no, 1 second, I have to wait until the recording gets again to the point the sidebar comes out. Yeah, you have anyway, you have the top bar with the heading, with the headline, and you could also add some sort of status bar at the bottom of the window, just with a checkbox, hide the announcements.
That's what I was thinking, and I think that would work. And then you can go back to your accounts to make it visible again, so they would have it. It's basically just a toggle. But
yeah, but one addition, it would be necessary, as you said. Then you have the ability to go to your accounts page. We should also provide some sort of alert panel when you check the hide announcements. Notify the user, hey, you're still able to unhide or show the feature again if you go to your accounts page.
Yep, agreed. That pattern makes sense. So I just think long term, we really want to think about how many things we're throwing into the sidebar. That's the only, like, I worry that once this gets in, it might pull some of the steam or sap some of the effort to get that administrative page moved forward. And I think that's a key priority for modernizing Drupal. from a usability standpoint.
You mean the dashboard functionality?
I'm sorry, yes, the dashboard, yes.
Yeah.
I apologize. Simply because like I use so many different pieces of software, including Apple, and like having a dashboard is just it's kind of a common pattern, and it feels like our user account page is not a dashboard.
No.
And there just isn't a it just doesn't, it feels clunky because people have to go to a bunch of different places to get information that should be aggregated.
Yep, totally agree. And that's also the point about why the user research is important. On the first, with those ad hoc interviews, those 5-minute ones, where we get just a quantitative list of features and informations people need and use. And then with those with those listening sessions, we get to the point why they're using those, to get the idea behind, because those requirements and those purposes behind that differ quite drastically, in my humble opinion, and therefore I think it's mandatory.
Yeah. In my other role, we're having a lot of discussions. So like in my job role, we're having a lot of discussions about how important it is to listen to the customers. Like there's I think having opinions is very, very helpful. And so there's like, for me, a dashboard is an opinion. You're assuming this is what people need. Maybe they don't. Maybe the site builder is going to say, hey, I don't want that there. So you have to be careful, but we need to listen to users when they say it's too difficult. I'm not getting to what I need. And anyway, yeah, I'm just babbling. I think it's because the goal of announcements is essentially education.
Yes.
Because ostensibly we're saying lots of people who use a Drupal site in an authenticated fashion do not inherently have knowledge of what's going on in the broader Drupal community. So you have to ask yourself, like, why do they need that information? What is the raison d'etre for that? Like, why should they care about what happens at Drupal.org? Because for many site builders, the technology on the back end is their choice, but the website, the web application to the visitors to the site who authenticate, they don't care about whether or not you went Sitecore or Drupal or WordPress or Adobe or something else. Like they're agnostic. So the site users are technology agnostic. But I think there's great power in putting that information out there, because there are many instances where it's just, I worry about it being opinionated in assuming that everyone who builds a website wants an announcement section on Drupal.org information just because they've installed a Drupal site.
Yep. And one thought, maybe it might be useful not to have only a single feed with announcements, but maybe 2 to 3 different feeds with a different scope and granularity, meaning one feed for people with admin privileges, one feed for general, let's say, authenticated users or content editors. And in that feed, you just get, for example, announcements about meetups or DrupalCons, something like that. And for other feeds, you get more technical, for example, security announcements and you name it.
I think you hit on something pretty mission critical. The announcements as they're currently envisioned is a highly targeted but very fixed and broad definition of what counts as an an announcement. It's like, okay, anything that Drupal.org has determined, rather than saying this is a pattern for interfacing feeds in general. Because I could really see a lot of enterprises that have multiple web properties saying, hey, I want to provide in my notifications or announcements feeds from my other websites.
Yeah, that is also a point, definitely.
So like it really is just a different UI on top of a feed, with right now the assumed feed being Drupal.org and the Drupal Association. The other thing is the way it looks today. I'm not seeing any strong differentiation or queue on the origin of a message. Like it's not very clear when it gets to that sidebar that it's coming from Drupal.org.
Yeah, that is what I've meant with the origin of the message, and the microcopy we should have a focus on when reviewing, that it's crystal clear that it isn't site specific, as you said before, but it is from, for example, Drupal.org.
Yeah.
And an idea what we could also, and it's definitely out of the scope of this issue at the moment, but for the sidebar, it would be also, if you have some sort of tag cloud at the top, you have those chip designs for Claro at the moment. And if you make, for example, those chip designs for everything or all, and then you have a chip for Drupal.org for the context, so you have able to hone your thread on the feed you see. So basically, you will only want to see meetups, you only want to see security, or you want to see security, and so the user is able to narrow down the fields of interest for him or her.
And I believe that's a really strong argument to be able to do something like that in a dashboard, where in a dashboard you could say, what are you interested in? Select the things that as a user you want to see, and that informs what shows up. So like you don't have to overload this announcements or this notifications feed. You can make its configuration part of what happens over the dashboard. But what that also does is it gives you a data point as a site builder for how your users want to use your site. Because now you can say, oh, wow, 90% of my site users want the default, or 90% don't want the default. They're turning off notifications or announcements, or 90% want to just see Drupal camp announcements. And like, that's something that I struggle with in Drupal is like, it's really kind of hard to get built-in patterns that give me data on what my users are doing in my site.
That's an excellent point. For the admin users, a feedback about the configuration anonymized for the users, but you still get an idea what your people, a quantification, what the people using your site are actually doing on it.
Yes.
That is brilliant.
I think we need to change our thinking when it comes to Drupal, in that like it's a site where I want to, into every use case, we should say, how can we secure and anonymize for users what they're doing, but in a way that maximizes our ability, like that's something that other competing software doesn't do at all or well. And so just looking at our patterns and doing that, and that it's a good argument for a dashboard. And in saying that, like, we can collect not just preferences, but we can collect utilization in patterns that make sense. Like, how often is someone using the announce? Like, this requires someone to click on that upper area. So is anyone ever doing it? I think it would be cool to get that information to allow Drupal sites to report anonymized information like how often their users are using different parts of the site.
That's a good point. My problem is if that kind of information, usually it gets aggregated and sent upstream to Drupal.org or WordPress.org or whatever, but that's a problem in regards of privacy. But if you make it inside the site, so only the site administrator is able to see that, then it's really, really valuable. And then you have still the opportunity that the administrator can say, okay, we could report it upstream also.
And I agree, it should not do it automatically. I also think that we need to put a lot of thought into how we did something like that. It would only be the broadest aggregation. Simply, I think of it as a pie chart that says 90% of site users are not using announcements, or 90% of, like 90% of administrators are never clicking on the reports tab.
And but in regards of that quantification, that's again, then per se, that doesn't tell us the whole story, because then we get to the problem again. Does the user know at all about that certain feature? For example, that 90% don't use module X, for example, because perhaps they just don't know about it. That could be also a reason. Or the reason could be they just don't need it, or they just don't like it, or they know about it, but they don't know how to use it actually.
But it's the data is more of a heat map on what we need to be paying attention to.
Indeed.
Rather than an indication of we don't need the reports button, for instance. Like, I think you're right. Like, we have to be very
mindful. Investigate.
Yes, it's nothing more than a symptom that you then investigate, and then you go through the user journey, the UX, the stories, the listening sessions, because then you start figuring out, okay, because maybe we need some way to get feedback on how people use Drupal in a way that is automated so that we can improve Drupal.
Yep.
Because I do worry that there are unconscious or subconscious behavioral patterns where we might think we're using announcements a lot, but we actually aren't, or vice versa. We might think something is trivial and we never use it, and we're actually using it a lot. Like it's something that's very important for the site. And it would just be cool to build a framework in the background long-term that could plug into a pattern like announcements and then give us useful data, or give the site builder useful data that the site builder could then further anonymize. Like maybe the site builder gets less anonymized, they can see something more granular, whereas whatever would be externally presentable would be as maximum anonymized as possible.
Yep, and that's the point where I think those listening sessions will become pretty handy, not only for the dashboard, but for Drupal in general, because the idea, but listening sessions is about just listening and collecting and the thoughts and the inner thinking of people. But the aggregation and synthesization of those results is in mental models. And a mental model is divided into a problem space at the top, where those thoughts are collected and by affinity grouping collected into groups. And underneath you have the solution space where you can see, okay, we have, for example, for that thinking style on top, have, for example, solution X, Y, and Z. But in the other place, something is missing. And that way you can strategize where to work on next in regards of usability and providing a better solution for the users and their problem and their purpose.
Yep.
And they are way more informed decisions and solutions provided afterwards.
It helps with prioritization, and it helps to avoid so something I've seen with content that I have an internal problem that we work on, is that we generate new content that we think solves a big problem, and then nobody ever uses that new content. And I just think there's a similar risk in just open source. There are so many problems, and there are certainly people who have a pet problem that they want to work on, and I absolutely support that. But a lot of times you will have a significant portion of the community that's just looking for a cool problem to work on, but they don't know where to start. And it would be really great to have that feedback that says, hey, we really think we're going to get a lot of bang for the buck by adding this particular thing in, but doing it in a kind of rolling fashion where we can automate giving people view that, hey, there's a lot of folks need this new type of like features that are tagged X. Why don't you go fix those problems? Because there's going to be a lot of benefit to it.
Yeah.
It's coordination and marshaling of resources in a way that is not as it requires less overhead for the people managing the project, the Drupal project from the top.
Yep.
So anyway, I'm going to hush up now. We're at time.
Indeed. Good talking, definitely. And I will try to finish the write-up, because I added also more of the theory and background, so that I'm not the only person able to facilitate. And then we can have a discussion about everything. It's a bit a longer document already. Try to finish it, and then we can ASAP try to do the ad hoc interviews, as well as those listening sessions and the other steps afterwards.
Yeah, that makes sense. And the sooner we get started on it, the sooner we get the feedback. So
yep, indeed.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ralph.
Thank you as well. And we'll see next Friday, I guess, and we will revisit the points from today.
Yes, and hopefully I'll talk more concisely about
it. Same, I will try as well. But I guess the dashboard topic will be out of scope for next week.
Yes, the dashboard topic, I think that all we want to do when it comes to the dashboard is we can mention that we think there should be a future topic that we talk about that does focus on it. And maybe we need one of those, we just need to place a comment in wherever that, like, they're not wish lists, but the idea issue
queue. Yeah.
The ideas queue. We just need to make certain that we open up something that links this announcements ticket. This feature that we've been talking about should be linked to that dashboard long-term thinking, an idea.
Yeah, indeed, I agree. And I think today's talk is also recorded, and also the transcript should be then possible to download, I guess, afterwards for Benji.
Yes,
when he's checking.
Hopefully he cuts off the stuff in the beginning, because
yeah.
I don't want to. I'm very sensitive about. So I guess we're done talking, or officially talking, but I don't want. I'm really sensitive to the victims and the families that live in Highland Park. It's really like I don't want anything showing up on the web that makes them have to think about this in some weird context.
That should be definitely cut out. I totally agree. There's nothing for that conversation. No, but I post a comment to Benji saying that the first part should be cut out and the rest could be posted online, because there are many good thoughts in that conversation today.
Yep.
And the transcript would be useful as well if he could aggregate it.
Yeah.
With Zoom. Okay. Then I hope you can. I don't know the word in English.
I speak
integrate.
German. So.
Oh,
yeah,
okay. Yeah. I hope you can settle down with the events happening and process them and find a relaxed and calm weekend.
We're going to try our best. So thanks again, Ralph. Have a good weekend too.
Likewise, and till next week.
Till next week.
Bye-bye.